Well, good evening, and welcome to Signs of Destiny 2004. This is Sunday afternoon, and we are about to close the conference, and I, as the organizer and host, always take it as my prerogative to have the last word. So I get to give you the last presentation. Today, it's really going to be more a personal journey than just about 2012 or the countdown to 2012 or just about crop circles, because I thought about this, and we've been doing these conferences on Earth Mysteries now since 1999 and the Millennium, and then on specifically the crop circles with the Signs of Destiny series since 2002. And I think that I wanted to share with you, I know you've heard a lot of other information, something more personal and perhaps you might say a little bit of my own pick of some of my personal favorite crop circles, even though I may not have been actually involved or experienced all of them in this body. They have had an influence on me and on my own personal journey into the crop circle research and also into the road, the countdown to 2012. So starting with my book, Mass Dreams of the Future, which actually was published before I knew anything about crop circles. And it came out at the end of the 1980s, and that was a time when crop circles were just starting to become at all known outside of a very small group of people in Wiltshire, England. The subtitle, though, is very important, and I insisted that McGraw-Hill, who did the publishing of the hardcover edition of the book, that do we face an apocalypse or a global spiritual awakening? The choice is ours. Because I think we must put crop circles in that wider context to understand that we are in a time of transition, we are in a time of change. The Mayan calendar tells us of this change, as you've seen the long count, the great cycle of the 13 Baktuns, which began all the way back at the time of the pyramids of Egypt, over 3000 BC, coming full circle at the solstice in 2012 of our era. And I think it's very important and very interesting to understand how the crop circles fit in, at least my experience with the crop circles fits in to this countdown to 2012. In the Mayan area, there are many pyramids. It's a very famous part of their ancient culture. One thing that's less well known is that their pyramids typically have 9 levels. Many more stairs, of course, because it's quite steep. But these 9 levels represent a very specific part of their creation and of their own, let's call it, prophecy about the universe. Because there is a prophecy that came from them and that was handed down to the successors in that part of the world, the Aztec people, that the gods who gave civilization essentially to mankind had certain attributes. And one of these attributes was that they came from the east, that they were in great sailing or cloud-type ships. They would have clouds. They wore funny helmets on their heads, and that they would carry a certain symbol. Now, the symbol that they would carry, according to the legend and the prophecy, was this one. If the gods returned, or false gods even came, and they carried this symbol, they would be representing the true spiritual hierarchy. The symbol is the circle of creation, of spirit, surrounding the 4 directions, or the equal armed cross of the 4 directions. And it's very important because there was also part of this prophecy that if they came bearing an elongated cross, where the vertical axis had taken precedent over the horizontal axis, then they would not be following the laws of creation of the original gods, and that they would bring a period of time that would be 9 times 52 years of hell. So, the number 9, who were the 9 underlords, or the lords of the underworld, or the lords of the lower realms, was very important in the Mayan cosmology and then in the Aztec cosmology. And it's very interesting to note that when Cortez and the Spanish first came to the Mexican lands, of course, where the Mayans and the Aztecs were, they came in boats that looked like, with their billowing sails, as if they were clouds. They wore strange helmets on their heads. They had horses, which was another part of the prophecy, that there would be strange animals with them. And, of course, what did they bring? They brought the long Latin cross. So, when you do some mathematics in this, it is very interesting that Cortez landed in 1519, 9 times 52, and we heard from the Aztec dancers and from Peter Langevin and others about how the 52-year cycle was a very key one through the Tzolk'in and the long count of coming together of the solar and lunar calendars only once every 52 years with the same day fall on the same sign. This 9 times 52 is 468. Well, if you add 1519 and 468, 1519 in our calendar being when the Spanish arrived in Mexico, 468 being 9 times 52, you get a very interesting date, and that date is 1987. And we know from Jose and all of the work that's been taught here what happened in 1987. 1987 was the harmonic convergence. 1987 was the ending of the prophecy of the 9 hells. It was the beginning of a new dawn for the native peoples of this hemisphere. It's also, and this is where prophecy relates back into the rest of the world, it was also a time when a judge in California, I think he actually made the decision in 1986, but it was very close to the time of the harmonic convergence. He made a decision that the states in the United States did not have the legal power to regulate gambling on Indian reservation land because that was sovereign territory. And we know the result of that for the first time in our generation, instead of declining in population, in resources, and going through more and more a very bad cycle, the native populations of the hemisphere are starting to grow. They have more money than they ever had, coming out of the casinos that, of course, have been built on many of the reservations. It's still not a perfect system by any means because it's very unequal, and certain of the native peoples, some of the ones that are the most traditional, have resisted because they do realize that the casinos can also be a very mixed blessing, bringing crime, alcoholism, and other very bad things to their people. But nonetheless, it was the beginning of a renaissance in that era, and it happened right at the time when the prophecy predicted the 9 hells would end. Now, remember that symbol that I told you, the one of the circle with the equal armed cross? Well, guess where that symbol appeared in 1987? It appeared in Wiltshire, England. It appeared just 3 days before the weekend of the harmonic convergence of August 16th of 1987, the closest set of crop circles to appear to that date. It was one of several that came, and August, as you've been told, is the end of the harvest period for most years, and so there were very few crop circles. There was actually 1 or 2 after that. And then the following year, instead of 2 or 3 or 5 crop circles appearing in a year, which has been what had been happening up until that point for the previous 7 or 8 years, all of a sudden 51 crop circles blossomed across Wiltshire, England, most of them in the shape of the equidistant cross, and if you were to connect these, you would have the perfect circle. Most of them within, quite literally, a stone's throw from Silbury Hill and Avebury. If you add the great Stonehenge of Avebury and its circle, you get 52. So this is not at all by chance. This is not an accident. Crop circles have been following much of the unfoldment of the Mayan calendar and the road toward 2012. And so I think it was wonderful that the Wiltshire Crop Circle Study Group, with Francine Blake at its head, decided in 2003 to add the crop circle, to these dream spell count, the Mayan calendar count, to their own annual crop circle calendar. That, in turn, inspired us to have this theme at this conference, and by total synchronicity, this year of our calendar 2004, the year starting on the Mayan New Year of July 26th of this year 2004, was the date that was chosen by Jose Arguelles as the year in which the new calendar, the new system, the new understanding of time needs to be brought to the public so that we will be prepared by the time we reach the changeover of 2012. You see, all of these things acting independently lead to this same conclusion. Now, there is Avebury, the great henge. And what do we have in Avebury seen from the air? Circle, equal-armed cross. One of the oldest spiritual symbols of mankind. Here we have it again. This actually was in 1988, one of the major crop circles of that year. The cross inside is implied, but very much present in the geometry. Now, we find it again in some very interesting crop circles that came in the mid-1990s. And the reason that they were interesting is that it's not too usual for crop circles to have the same formation occur virtually in the same field and have the same geometry. Here's the circle, the cross expanding out at a place called Martock in Somerset, not too far from Glastonbury. In 1998, virtually the same formation occurred again in a field next to the place that the original one occurred in. This got my attention, and I asked what was special about Martock. What is Martock? Well, it turns out in the only book that I could find that talked at all about Martock, that apparently in the Middle Ages, when the great Black Plague, the bubonic plague, struck Europe, killing up to 1/3 of the population and actually up to a half of the population in many countries across Europe. Imagine this country in 2004, America has over 300 million population. If we were to have a plague that would strike us, killing 1/3 of our population within a period of just a few years, 100 million people would die. You can't imagine anything bigger, greater, more important that would be put out in all of the media. Well, the same, all proportions being granted, of course, this much smaller population of the time, but the same was true in Europe. It was a devastating experience, economically, spiritually even. And so Martock was spared. Something special about that village happened. So they gave praise, they gave thanks by creating angel statues. And there were apparently just literally dozens of statues of angels that were put around that village and in the church of that village. And it became called the Angel Village of that time. Many of them were later taken away when there was the Reformation, and such things were considered to be idols rather than a thankful church. The people took them away. But nonetheless, that still is struck, and Martock is still called the Angel Village in Somerset. Now, I gave this talk on this particular relationship of Martock and the great symbol here, the spiritual symbol of humanity, the equal-armed cross inside the circle, a couple of years ago in Sedona, where my wife and I live. And a man came up to me afterward and he said, you know, it's not just the Angel Village. There's also very important genetic research being done, and it's being done because of Martock, because they have found that there is a recessive gene in that population of the descendants of people who've lived there over hundreds of years, and that gene fights bacterial infection. And the Black Plague was a bacterial infection. And they're doing genetic research to try to duplicate that, because right now with our over-medication, our over-antibiotics, we are now creating bacteria, or I should say they are mutating, but our medicines are essentially creating the mutations that they are resisting the medicines that we currently have. And they're hoping that genetic therapy may be a solution for some of these problems that are now coming in some of these staphylococcus and other bacterial infections. So you see, crop circles pointing us a spiritual solution to an ancient and very real problem in our world. We also found the same symbol in many of the Christian iconography. This is from the Cathedral at Chartres. Spiritual symbolism is a deep part of the crop circle phenomenon. As I said, this is going to be a retrospective of some of the crop circles that have had a deep influence on me. So actually, even though the Martock one came in the 1990s, we're going to go back now to a little earlier time, and actually this is in 1990. This was a crop circle that, when shown to the Hopi elders, and those who know me know that's how I got involved in the crop circle work. My book, Mass Dreams of the Future, came out in the late 1980s, the November of 1989. And the following year I moved to Arizona, and it was just in February of 1991 that I got a phone call from some of the Hopi elders saying that they wanted to teach me more of their prophecy. And one of the reasons that they were very concerned about what was happening in the world is certain parts of their prophecy, certain signs of their prophecy were coming true. And one of those signs that they had known about was what was happening in February of 1991, which was, anybody remember? The first Gulf War. That is when we were bombing Baghdad for the first time. It was no surprise when I showed these Hopi elder this particular crop circle. They said to me, this is Mother Earth crying out, the Pachamama. Look at the balance. This is a Hopi symbol for balance. If you stop the crop circle here, you would be in balance, correct? But look at this. Now think of it as stylized. If you abstract the circle, what is happening? An arrow is being pointed and throwing the formation off balance. This is an arrow pointed at the heart of Mother Earth, I was told. And when I told them that that crop circle had occurred the day Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, they said, this is all part of our prophecy. This war, the Gulf War, and it still gives me chills because I will never forget Grandfather Martin saying to me, when 10 years have gone by, we're in 1991, remember, this is Grandfather Martin at his loom, wonderful old traditional Hopi man who allowed me to take these pictures very graciously, even though they usually don't allow photography. He said 10 years will go by and you will find that that man meeting Saddam Hussein will still be in power and he will cause you more trouble then than he's causing you today. Think about it. What is 10 years after 1991? 2001. What happened in 2001 that has led us back into Iraq, into this terrible quagmire? Exactly. 9/11. So you see, what goes around comes around. So for several years, I worked and talked with the Hopi. I would go to the crop circles and then I would bring back certain photographs and show them, and they would tell me which part of them spoke particularly to their prophecy. The second part of one of their prophecies says that before the new world, before the new earth will come, before the great purification, as they call it, will take place, there must happen two things that are very, very important. The first is the eagle must land on the moon, which we conveniently did for them in 1969 by landing the Eagle lunar lander, first vehicle made by humans to land on the moon, the Eagle. We named it that, they didn't. And then the second part of the prophecy, which is much less well known, is that the moon must appear on the earth. The moon must come down to the earth. Well, we not only brought moon rocks down to the earth, as you all know, with some of the Apollo missions, but in 1992, this symbol, the lunar symbol, the full moon and the crescent moon, which is the Hopi symbol for the moon, they include both into their symbol, occurred for the first time in a crop circle in Wiltshire. Colin Andrews was very excited about this because he knew of the same work. He had been to see some of the same elders that I had been with. And so they said, this is the second leg of the prophecy, is coming so. Now you would think that the Hopi would be in favor of the great purification and the change, but in fact, many of them have told me that it is a sad occasion because they feel that it means that we have failed our current race of humanity, our current civilization of the world. If the world must go through great purification and fire and difficulties, that means that they, the guardians of the land, the keepers of balance, have been thrown off and have failed. Just so you understand that it's a very difficult thing for them to talk about. Now, 1 year later, this crop circle occurred in 1993 at a place called Chair Hill, near one of those white horses in Wiltshire. And this was the part that immediately attracted the attention of the Hopi. These two symbols, which actually in ancient Sumerian mean the first created man, the Adama, as it is in their language, the Adam, that's this symbol, the created man. This symbol is very important in many of the ancient Hopi tablets. They have stone tablets. These are kept by various clans. This is the Fire clan. Part of it is broken. They're still looking, by the way, for the extra pieces. And they expect the information will come to them from the east. just as the Mayan prophecy said that the gods will return back from the east. These are the Bear clan tablets. You see the bear claws. Look over here. That symbol with the snake of wisdom, cord, their staple, crop, the sun, the four-directional cross, the clouds and the Kajina, or the sky spirits, and who live in the mountains. There is no accident that July 26th, which is the beginning of the solar calendar for the Mayans, is the day that the Hopi celebrate what they call their home dance. And the home dance doesn't mean that they go home. It means that the Kajina spirits go back home to their underground place in the mountains for the winter, and they will come back with the next growing season to make the land flower again. So when they saw this symbol in the crop circle, they said, this is part of the prophecy coming true of bringing together of the worlds. And another shoe essentially dropped, that we are getting closer and closer to purification. At that time, right after that period, they decided that they needed to go back to their village. And essentially, they are still there waiting because they have said, we don't know if anything can be changed now. It is set from their point of view. That was what I was told, and this was way back about 1994. We will see how it will come. Essentially, that we need to cultivate our own individual spiritual path, because this purification, as from their point of view, was now a certainty that it would be coming, if not in our lifetimes, very quickly and very soon. Now, another great crop circle that has influenced me, and that is part of this same work, is this one, as I'm sure many of you recognize, from July of 1991 at Barbary Castle. This crop circle has the radius and the circle. It was the first time that there were straight lines, triangles in the crop circles in that formation. This is the Fibonacci sequence, and when added together, this particular one, all of the measurements, if you take it to that corner, you get 333 feet exactly within an inch. 333. Cosmic number of Hermes Trismegistus, the great alchemist of ancient time, the Horus reborn, the Quetzalcoatl of the Mayans. Now, this particular part of the circle wasn't very well understood or known until two German doctors, whose names are Koch and Kaiburg, got involved, and they believed that this, with other symbols that came in that same year, showed a very specific star map. And so they began their work of actually making crop circles in the open and doing world meditations to influence, to ask the crop circle makers to see if they could get answers. They believe that this crop circle, and particularly this part, is referring to the great 6 stars that are in the northern sky and that were called the Mariner stars, because they were the ones that you could navigate your boat by. And this is where all ancient peoples navigated by these, in the northern hemisphere, navigated by these 6 great stars. It goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. And the 3, because the Barbary Castle, of course, is all in 3, are representing the belt of Orion. And according to Koch and Kaiburg, you see here from an ancient Egyptian tomb that the belt of Orion is pointing at another star, just as the original Apollo insignia that was taken off before it was ever made public, but this is the original Apollo insignia, points to a small star. And this is the same as the Barbary Castle, pointing to that center. They believe that this is the star from which come beings that have been influencing us ever since the time of the ancient Egyptians, if not further, and who are working with the energies and the earth energies making the crop circles. And Koch and Kaiburg have been making, as I say, crop circles off and on in various years, and they believe that they have been getting answers to some of their questions about this. And the answers parallel what I have been telling you, that we are coming close to a time of great change, a time of great transition, and the crop circles are pointing us in that direction. They are giving us warnings, and they are also giving us hope. You've heard how, in fact, Levengood and Bert are trying to get seed companies interested in a very crucial aspect of some crop circle energy that actually potentizes seeds. So without having to genetically manipulate the food that we eat, we could grow much stronger, healthier, better crops for the people of the world to take us into the next millennium. Now, also in 1991, a new theory had just come out called fractal theory. It was a theory that was in part put forward by Benoit Mandelbrot, who was a French scientist who teaches at the Cambridge University in England. And I don't pretend to be a scientific mind to have the theory, but it has to do with using computers to take numbers and fractions and generate larger and larger and larger and larger amounts. And ultimately, if you graph these, and this is what a computer graphic program can do, instead of finding that you just have a random kind of set of numbers, they thought it would just be chaotic. No, that there is a natural order in the universe is what this was showing us. And this order can take this form. This is called the Mandelbrot set. And it was believed that this could only be generated by computers. But of course, on August 17th of 1991, the circle makers told us that it can appear right here on the Earth. And so one of the most important crop circles of all time occurred on that date, just 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks after the Barbary Castle one. We were being bombarded at that time. We were being opened by messages. A communication was attempting to open. Now, not only did this occur, it occurred just 4 miles from Professor Mandelbrot's house at Cambridge instead of in Wiltshire. And they're about 200 miles apart. So it isn't just next door. The fact that this happened, however, scared someone or something. I don't know. All I know is that the British military actually took over the field, bought it from the farmer, burned the crop, and said, we're not going to let anybody research it. And 2 weeks after that, Doug and Dave, the famous artists, were brought out to the world media and said, we made all the crop circles from 1978 until now. And the story was instantly bought, went all around the world, and for many, many people, that's case closed. It's why we don't have 1,000 or more people in this room to learn what has really been happening in our world. Closing down rather than opening up. This is when Doug and Dave were forced by researchers, and the media got backing of that, to make a crop circle in public. Well, that's what they made. That's their demonstration circle. Now, Francine showed you a very similar one, but I just want to show you the lay in a recent genuine circle. You see the difference. Totally, totally different. Sometimes those circles can look pretty good from the air, but not at all from the ground. As we went forward into the 1990s, another very important set of crop circles occurred in the summer of 1994. I think there were 15 in all, and they started at the end of May, and they all went up to a very specific date, which was, I believe it was July 15th of 1994. Anybody know what was happening then? It was a very interesting time, and I'm sure you all witnessed it. It was the time of July 16th to July 22nd when the Shoemaker-Levy comet fragments bombarded Jupiter. And in many cases, the crop circles had exactly the number of fragments, the angles of bombardment, and afterward crop circles came that showed the plumes of ash or of gas that came up from Jupiter and formed beautiful shapes, and actually crescent-like shapes. All of this occurring. So the crop circle phenomenon, it predicted the event, and it depicted the event, and then it showed the aftermath of the event for anyone that was watching. One of the theories that has come forward about that is that our solar system has another large body in it, another planet. Some of you have heard of this with Zecharia Sitchin, the planet Nibiru, and that essentially we're going through a time when that planet is coming back toward the inner part of the solar system. And therefore, it is to be expected that there will be more comets, more meteors, more asteroidal-type bodies coming back in, because there are a lot of those smaller bodies out in this Kuiper belt, or Oort cloud, as the area is called. And as this big planet comes back in, by its gravity well, it will actually, like a slingshot, begin to bring those planets back, these small pieces of rock, back toward us. Well, think of our part of the solar system. Jupiter is the basketball, we're the baseball. Which one's going to get hit first? The basketball, obviously. So we are being warned by this. Now, this is a much less known crop circle, and yet it was a very important one of 1994. This is the first time that we had the number 13. 13 moons. The Mayan calendar is based on the 13 moon year. This one came at right outside of Avebury-Truslow, and we're even shown the crescent moon just in case we would miss it, because we humans aren't always too swift. They put it right there for us. The farmer obliterated this one in about 2 days, so it was unfortunate. But a few people did get to go in it, and a researcher named Ron Russell had an out-of-body, out-of-time experience in this crop circle. We've talked about the manipulation of time. Well, it was already happening there. He was out there with a friend at dusk, and there were just the two of them, and he stepped out of the circle kind of in a meditational state, and as he did so, he stepped out of our time, and he smelled and saw campfires, like an early Neolithic time of 5,000 years ago, when this particular area was settled and the stone circles were being made. And he realized after 3 or 4, maybe 10 steps, that he didn't know where he was. He shut his eyes and very intelligently retraced his steps exactly, going backward, and when he opened them, he was back in the crop circle again. Time changes in relation to some crop circles. This, of course, is one much better known from 1996. 1996 was a watershed year. Suddenly, crop circles went bonkers, magnificent, giant. This one was over 150 circles near Stonehenge. I think 10,000 visitors came to this. It was the crop circle of the decade, because so many people were able to go and saw and went into it. The farmer at first resisted, but afterward he realized that people were offering him some money. He was having the field paid for. His nephew went out there and sat, and we all talked to him, and turned out to be really quite an eye-opening experience, where farmers and croppies, as researchers are often known, got together, and literally hundreds of people got to know more about crop circles probably than any other time. And this crop circle also occurred in daylight. There were the stories of the airplane pilot again who flew over the field at a certain hour in the afternoon. It wasn't there. Flew back about 20 to 40 minutes later, and there it was. Then, that same summer, July 29th, this triple Julia fractal set occurred. Very, very beautiful set, and very important to me, because actually my wife, Callista, was the person who first spotted it on the ground. And we walked in it and probably were the first people in it, because it wasn't even recorded. No one talked about it for another 24 hours. It was a gray, misty, unusual day, not a very pleasant day, and people couldn't fly. So she happened to see it as we were driving along. It was at Windmill Hill. Very, very powerful formation. And one of the arms, I think it was this arm, all of the circles went counterclockwise. The lay of the wheat went out. And that is a very powerful statement. The other arms were clockwise. We find that the lay of the crop often has a difference in how it reflects on us and how our psychological impact is. People like walking in the clockwise circles. People don't like walking in the counterclockwise circles. And I realize that the counterclockwise circles, just like churning something, it's bringing it up and out. A lot of negativity, a lot of things you don't want to look at, maybe the shadow side. Whereas in the clockwise, you are actually going higher and higher and reaching, and it brings you into a higher dimension. So it's a very interesting that this had one arm, the counterclockwise, and two arms clockwise. Here it is from a pole shot. This is Mark and Stewart's of the Crop Circle Connectors pole shot of it. And here is the lay. Look at the beautiful lay. Every bit, and there were 3 to 4 layers of the lay, as there often are in the genuine crop circles. This one is a drawing. This comes from 1997, and I chose it because I was running a seminar on meditation for the Association for Research and Enlightenment's local council in Arizona. And it was in April, I believe it was April 28th of 1997. Not a date you would associate with crop circles, but part of the meditational process, I had them focus on what would you like to see in a crop circle. What symbolism would you like to see? And we had a group of 40 people, and we had a talk about this, and we went into meditation, and we focused, and finally we came up with this as one of the symbols that we would like to see in a crop circle. To my amazement, and we know that crop circles follow intention if it is pure, if it is honest, if it's honorable. To my amazement, the following day, April 29th, this circle appeared. 4 out of the 5 elements. Only one was missing, and it is the Star of David. And there is still no peace in that place, because this was a peace circle that people were thinking. But you see, crop circles, and this is just one example. I give you my example. This is my personal journey in the crop circle world. There are dozens of people, researchers and others, who have sent intention or who've had a dream, and the next day or in 2 days or 3 days later, a crop circle that has matched that pattern has occurred. They do follow intent. Also in 1997, this was on July 14th, this beautiful spirogram, 14 spirals. And I include it because I had a very personal, deep meditation sitting in the center of this particular crop circle. It was very, very moving to me about the energy of our world. And I saw multiple worlds, not just time being changed, but the possibility of endless amounts of space, endless alternative Earths, endless alternative me's. And I realized that at every moment, every second, part of me is choosing or not to be in this reality and this consciousness and this place, and that choice is a positive choice, because that's where I need to be. And that is what that circle was showing us. All of it coming to one. Also in 1997, and this I didn't get to go into, it was up near Oxford, but it was the first time we had a 3-dimensional crop circle. You see the torus, the toroid shape. It's a very key aerodynamic shape for bringing the 2-dimensional image into 3 dimensions. Simple, but absolutely elegant and totally perfect. Then we had this one at Milk Hill, which was one of the greatest fractals. They came near the end of 1997, August of 1997, and it was a double fractal, not only going out, but also going in. The fractal geometry has been more and more shown to us through the crop circle phenomenon, and it's literally the crop circles, I think, have brought more people into a knowledge, even if it's superficial, of fractals than anything else any of the publications of the mathematicians could do. 1998. Many of you may recognize this. I call it the 7-petaled rose or flower. It is the first time we had circle divided into 7 perfect parts with the fractalized. Look at the way the lay of this golden wheat is, so that you see it in a 3-dimensional, almost like the petals. This, of course, was Dolf Bratt, a Dutch researcher who later passed away, did the geometry. This was the first crop circle to be really studied in depth, because it is so hard to imagine a perfect 7 pattern out of a 360-degree circle. This circle influenced Rod Bearcloud, Sedona artist and friend, whose videos depict in wonderful graphics how this circle fits with a very unique shape that is akin to a flying disc, or flying wing, I should say, and that has some very strong meaning from what he calls the Star Nation people, those elders who are influencing us and giving us hope and giving us messages through the crop circles, I believe, as well. I call them interdimensional beings. He says Star Nation people, but they are the same. Here he is, leading our group meditation at the end of the Wiltshire Conference. And it was fascinating because we were there And we were 137 people inside the circle. I know, I counted. And then we saw, just hovering on the outside, 7 guys dressed in dark colors, young guys. They wouldn't come in, and somebody said to me, "Oh, that's Team Satan." So you see, if you add the 7 and 137, what do you get? You get the perfect number of 144. So to me, this was a lesson that we need to include Team Satan in the whole picture. You can't live without the shadow side. That's part of the crop circle phenomenon. It will never be 100% perfect. It will always have the Team Satans involved, and yet they are part of the transformation that has to take place. This was the next year of 1999. This is actually not only beautiful, extraordinary lay. Look at this tiny, tiny ring around here that was only about 8 inches wide. One of the first times we had these very, very, very fine circles, and the harmony of it. But it was actually also a map of the eclipses and the solar eclipse of the summer of 1999, which was visible from England. The total solar eclipse, the last one that would be visible for literally dozens of years, and certainly in the 20th century, was a very key part of that summer and the crop circles that came. This was a map of the eclipses of the 20th century. If you were to take that like an orange and put it over a globe, that's what you would get in 3 dimensions. Also in 1999, this one was appropriately a place called Devil's Den, because it was an ancient dolmen, an ancient Neolithic site nearby. Beautiful, perfect hexagram. Many crop circles come in pentagram and hexagram shapes. The pentagram and the hexagram are the 2 building blocks of our life forms-based DNA. It was also important to us personally because it was the first time that we had our new crystal skull Gaia Luz with us in the crop circle. And we found that Gaia Luz and her other companions focalize energy. And I'll show you in a minute some other pictures of with using them actually as guides for energy centers in certain crop circles, and they're quite amazing for that. But Devil's Den was the first one. Now we're into 2000. This was called the Surrealistic Pillow by some people. This is the crop circle that Francine Blake had very bad camera trouble with her new digital camera. Actually, it was a very special one to take pictures for the calendar, and it completely froze, completely would not work. And later, when she took it to be repaired, the man said, "Have you been near a nuclear reactor?" Because the only thing that could do this to this camera would be radiation, as if it were coming out of a nuclear site. And this was also one of the first ones that we noticed that had the famous ghosts. The crop circle the following year, showing that the soil, as Nancy Talbot and others have shown you, had been affected. A very clear signal that more was going on. And look at the anomalies actually in the picture. This is from Francine. A year later, still showing up. The energies were very high still in this particular set of circles. Also in the year 2000, for me, this was one of the most beautiful ones of that whole time. This is the petaled flower, and it's the unfolding, the opening of the petals. This is an ancient Tibetan symbol in the center. And you find the unfoldment. And we will see these again, these same forms. And look, though, here, this is the one that's beautiful. It's still opening. So what we are being told, I believe, is that the transitional process is not complete, that we are involved in it, but it is not complete. We still have more to go. Then this one, also in the year 2000, July of 2000, at Silbury Hill, the stars, and look at where the star is out of place. Well, of course, that immediately calls your attention to it, and we could see that from the ground, and we were there the first day. And so I took one of my crystal skulls, and I went there, and I said, this is something to take a picture of. There was a bouquet of stalks going up. And it was only, because this is not a digital camera, it was just a film camera, it was only when I got my picture developed a few days later that I realized I had taken an ionized plasma vortex right at that center point. One of the better pictures, because it's actually, you can see it spinning. These pink anomalies right there, and you see the incredible bouquet that it was centered on. Also, that same week, the first time we had 11. These were 11 segments in this toroid shape. You see it's sort of like a lifesaver, right? or a buoy, a lifesaver from a boat, or a little candy lifesaver. And this occurred near Beckhampton, and many people went in it. It was a very welcoming crop circle. And what was fascinating, you can see it from here, there was a very unusual lay in the center. Almost random looking, but it's not. And when we got in the center, anomalies occurring again. Both here around the crystal skulls and over here, one of those flares. And look at this very unusual. And it was not messy at all. It was absolutely pristine, but it was a shape that it would have been worth trying to get like a pole shot directly down, because I'm sure there was a message in this. And yet, as much happens, we do lose a lot, because it's very sometimes hard to get those things, and people don't think of it immediately. And when it's the lay on the ground, as Nancy said, as soon as people start to walk in it, of course, it's going to be disturbed and it will be changed. 2001, no, we're not in England, we're in Germany now. The phenomenon began to expand in the mid-1990s and now has been in over 30 countries, and some of the most beautiful and complex circles have actually been in Germany as well as in England. This was at a place called Zierenberg, and it happened in rapeseed, or the canola oil. And again, we got there a little after the beautiful flowering. This was in May, we didn't get there till June. Again, look, the energy is still very present around the crystal skulls. And not only the plasma vortex energy, but look at this. I'm standing in this formation, just over the area, the balls of light, and so close to the camera. Callista took the picture. The beautiful German hills in the background. Later we found that this area is similar to Wiltshire in that there are ancient stone sites here, and the same culture of the Neolithic people that built Stonehenge also built sites in this part of Germany, most of which have been destroyed because there's been so much more war and invasions of this area of Europe. 2001 in England, the Ouroboros, the snake, the world snake. Look at the beautiful filigree in this barley circle. And then the turtle, the symbol, of course, of Turtle Island, of our home, of Mother Earth, of our planet. Incredibly complex and beautiful symbol. The snake, or wisdom energy, has been part of the crop circle phenomenon from nearly the beginning, and almost every year we are gifted with a snake circle, as you saw in some of the other earlier slides. Also that year, we had the first real Mayan symbol come through. It came at a place that was in the north. It was further away from Wiltshire, and 3rd of June, and Nick Nicholson, a researcher there, is the only one that got this picture. And this glyph is known as the Milky Way glyph. It's also the ancients, because the belief, of course, is that the ancients came from the Milky Way. So we're tying into the Stargate now with the crop circles and the Mayans. Then, August of 2001, sort of the grandmother or grandfather of all crop circles, 409 circles. This one big enough to build a house in. Now that wasn't enough for the circle makers, because just a few days after that, to me, still the most enigmatic and unusual crop circle that's ever occurred happened. This one, the face. The blending of light and shadow is totally unique for this. And right after that, Chilbolton occurred. It was that same summer that I got the first ball of light in England, right in Stonehenge. Not in a crop circle, but we know that they come in the ancient sites all over that place. And here are balls of light in an American crop circle that year, in Minnesota. I've seen them in German crop circles. I've seen them in other places that photographers have seen the same phenomenon. I do believe that they mean we are moving into a time when the dimensions are coming closer, or the veil, as some people would say, is thinning, and the digital photography and the digital technology is able to see what the naked eye cannot see in most cases. Now we're in 2002. This is a place called Züchen in Germany, a beautiful scalloped shell, or a sunburst crop circle. And when we went in there, we got a totally different type of anomaly. Look at this. Another vortex, 2 of them, right again, exactly in line with the crystal skulls. They do have the ability to amplify energy. That's one of the principles of crystals. Somehow being carved in the skull shape, which is, of course, the sacred cranium, the sacred knowledge shape of the ancients. They do bring that, but totally horizontal and amazing in this beautiful barley circle. Also in 2002, who could forget the extraordinary crop circle at Stonehenge? The ribbon with the same shapes as we saw earlier, these beautiful ones of the flower that had been in 2000 that was opening. Now it's fully open. It's as if the petals are fully present at this one at Stonehenge. And you see how the landscape is taken into account. The ancient burial mounds, a part of the borders of the framing. This was also, I think, my personal favorite of that year, the Nautilus. Again, the symbol of life, the symbol of continuity, so totally perfect in this field near Pusey, near the White Horse of Pusey. And this, unfortunately, by the time the photograph got taken, this was a perfect replica in miniature, and it had been trashed. Somebody came out and trashed it in the night. But someone did get a picture. I saw it in a book, and it's actually the perfect replica of the other. Only everything is about 4 inches wide. Tiny, tiny, tiny. As above, so below. As within, so without. This one in 2002 was also very important because in this one, I think it was in this circle over here, there was a yin-yang formation, and we also got an amazing anomaly. Everything went white. The energy was so strong that the camera just was overwhelmed. Other pictures taken in other places that day in other parts of the circle, perfectly fine. Again, this is not a digital film, this is a regular film. That same summer, the one that I've used in some of the advertising for these conferences, because I think it's so important, the eye of God, it's been called. It's actually a left eye. It is the eye of Horus. The eye of Horus, of course, is the eye of knowledge, the eye of wisdom, and there are 33 rays. And the triangle. I think Nicolas Cage was trying to tell us something in advance. The new movie that's coming out where they know everything based on the triangle and the dollar bill. That's right. And this was in 2002. You see, crop circles anticipate. They point our way. Look at this. Another of the light anomalies, and look at the size of the pathways. This actually was in the eye part, right there. See how there's tiny, tiny pathways through the iris? And this is what was occurring. We know that this crop circle of 2002 was a mirror of the harmonic concordance, the follow-on to the harmonic convergence that came last November with the eclipse. And astrology matches the crop circle. John Muriel showed this. A very important crop circle for that year. Now we move into 2003. The Avebury pentagram, 5-pointed star, a key symbol. One of the things that was interesting to me, and I wrote about this in my Mass Dreams newsletter that year, there were no circles, no curved lines. Everything looked straight. But if you walked in the formation, every one of the pentagrams and every one of the triangles was actually a circle, and then the crop laid down around it. Those of us who went with us into that formation and experienced the incredible, it was like you had to go within it in order to see what was unfolding from it. It looked just straight and military and sort of, in your face. And then when you went inside, it was soft and gentle and totally different, a form of energy. Perhaps no accident that this came on George Bush's birthday. Also in 2003, the first time we had a perfect 13-pointed star, coming now back to the ancient 13 of the Mayan calendar. And absolutely perfect with this little satellite, and again a ring that was just inches wide. And beautiful lays in each of the center of these 13 points. That summer, It's an unusual crop circle, but it had a very unique experience for those of us that went with our group, who went with us that summer of 2003. Not only did we get to meet the farmer, Tim Carson, and have a discussion of crop circles, because we had a journalist with us, and journalists will ask questions that nobody else will think of to ask, and just sort of say, well, what's your opinion of this? And he gave it. It was fascinating. But then, when we had a group photo taken in the center of that crop circle, look at the anomalies. Right in the center. Balls of light again. An ancient symbol, which is the flower of life. This is back from ancient Egypt. One of the most extraordinary examples of it in the crop circles in recent years was in 2003 at Barbary Castle. Like lace. Callista and I happened to be there the very first day, and the way the field was, you can see that it's slightly convex, I guess. Convex is over. I always get them mixed up. Anyway, if you walked over here, you could not see the end of the crop circle. That's how big it was, because of the slight rise of the hill and going over the other side. So when you're on the ground, you have an entirely different experience than when you see the circles from the air. It's why you need to experience the circles as much as possible when it's possible to do that, as well as just see the pictures. But the mandalas also have an influence on us, I am convinced. These are mandalas, just as out of the Eastern tradition. Also, the end of 2003, this molecule, again a hexagram formation, and this is part of the chain of the DNA, and the places that are left open are actually exactly where the pentagram formations would form. And here's a crop circle that looks like it's all curves, and yet it's forming straight lines. Totally made up of crescents. I showed you the Hopi moon. Up until 1992, there had never been a crescent in a crop circle that had been shown. After 1992, we've had a crescent at least once every single year. Now we're finally into 2004, and I only have chosen a couple because I think it's really up for everyone to find what is the crop circle that speaks most to them. It's why I would urge you to get photographs, the aerial photographs, to meditate on them, to look through either the yearbook or the calendar of each year and see which ones speak to you. This one spoke most to me. Some people called it Gabriel's horn, a trumpet. Incredible. The largest two circles were counterclockwise. These were clockwise. This spiral was very, very beautiful to walk. Sometimes one feels you have to walk in the way the lay of the crop goes, and that was very easy in this one. This one was formed right the night of the solstice, June 20th, and Francine tells us that, and I think she mentioned it in her talk, how they sat on a hill and did the ancient fire ceremony and sang the mantras from India for hours and hours, having different people come and keeping an unbroken chant. And in the line with the place, in the same line of sight, from that hill, the crop circle appeared between then and following dawn. Intent, manifestation. The sun and the moon was talked about. This was a very beautiful one. The centers were quite unique in it, and also I had a little compass, handheld compass, and it went wild in this crop circle. And we were with some French people. Of course, you know my wife is French, and so sometimes we will have French people come visit us, so we can take them and show the circles in French as well as English. And one of them had a digital camera, and it reacted, and he got just the end of the compass spinning around. It was very, very interesting to me. So next year, one of our projects is to take a compass and see what will happen at various places. Because I found that it changed if you were holding it at this level than as if you were holding it down to the ground. So it changed the direction of the compass. It wouldn't stay still, and each was looking to a different north. So again, we're talking of spatial change in the magnetic field. And finally, this one, which was the 7, 11, and 13 pointed star. Not a terribly big formation, not a terribly fancy formation, but so precise. And one of our group got a wonderful ball of light in it. I don't have it because we're at the end of the slide tray. I could only fit 80 slides, and I wanted to show as large a panorama as I could. But I want to end with one last slide because I think it's very important. This was from 1991. An American guy who was a little bit crazy, but a really interesting character. He went and he wrote in the field the message. He actually wrote it in English, "Speak to us." He got the farmer's permission, paid something, and wrote out in Latin letters, "Speak to us," regular alphabet. Just a couple of days later, this was in the adjacent field. Linguists took this. They decided that it was alphabetical. These were the ending marks, beginning, ending, and that there was a mark here that marked in the middle, these marks, like the words. And when they put it through all the computers with all the known languages back and forth that they could, I think they went through 32 different languages, only one language made any sense if you assume these are alphabetical characters. Latin, the ancient language of England. Aponoastos. And aponoastos, what does it mean? Apono is actually the plural of I, so it's we. That's the we form. Apono, well, that's pretty clear. We speak a Latin-based language. Oppose, we oppose. Astos, astos means trickery, deceit, hoaxing. Speak to us. We oppose hoaxing. The year of Doug and Dave. And that's what I want to leave you with, because I think that even though the crop circles have many messages for us, one of them is that we must learn to come together and to oppose together those who would trick us, those who would sell us a false bill of goods, those who would tell us that things are not as they are, those who would try to attempt to stop the great changes and the transition that we are going through, those that would fool us. That is what I wanted to leave you with. I know that Flor de Mayo has a very special message that she wants to read to you, so I'm just going to say that I will turn it over to her, and then Robin Miller will come and he will play a little bit more, because I want you to hear you didn't get to hear him. I want you to hear the music of the angels, and we're going to close with that. Robin, can you actually come up and perhaps you could softly play as Flor de Mayo reads her message from the grandmothers, if that's all right. I think it would be wonderfully accompanied, and that will be a fitting finale to our show. So at that time, I'm going to ask you not to applaud, but I will allow you to applaud now for that work, and thank you very much.
This is the statement that came about after the grandmothers got together. This is what it says. We are 13 indigenous grandmothers who come together for the first time from October 11th through October 18th in Phoenicia, New York. We gathered from the four directions in the land of the people of the Iroquois Confederacy. We come here from the Amazon rainforest, from the Arctic Circle of North America, the great forest of the American Northwest, the vast plains of North America, the highlands of Central America, the Black Hills of South Dakota, the mountains of Oaxaca, the desert of the American Southwest, the mountains of Tibet, and from the rainforest of West Africa. Affirming our relations with traditions, medicine people, and communities throughout the world, we have been brought together by a common vision to form a new global alliance. We are the International Council of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. We have united as one. Ours is an alliance of prayer, education, and healing for our Mother Earth, all her inhabitants, all the children, and for the 7 generations to come. We are deeply concerned with the unprecedented destruction of our Mother Earth, the contamination of our air, water, and soil, the atrocities of war, the global scourge of poverty, the threat of nuclear weapons, and waste, the prevailing culture of materialism, the epidemic which threatens the health of the earth people, the exploitation of indigenous medicine, and with the destruction of indigenous way of life. We, the International Council of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers, believe that our ancestral ways of prayer, peacemaking, and healing are vitally needed today. We come together to nurture, educate, and train our children. We come together to uphold the practice of our ceremonies and to affirm the right to use our plant medicine free of legal restriction. We come together to protect the lands where our people live and upon which our culture depends, to safeguard the collective heritage of traditional medicine, and to defend the earth herself. We believe that the teachings of our ancestors will light our way through an uncertain future. We join with all those in the world who honor the Creator and all who work and pray for our children, for world peace, and for the healing of our Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Flor de Mayo. Before we completely disband those that are not staying on for tomorrow's institute, I just want to tell you how wonderful it has been for Callista and for myself to have you all here and to invite you to Signs of Destiny 2005, which will again be the third weekend of November. And we have been given assurances that our main keynote speaker will be Graham Hancock, who wrote an extraordinary book called Heaven's Mirror with his wife, who is one of the world's greatest photographers. And so we are going to concentrate on that relationship of defining the sacred site. And crop circles, of course, are a key part in sacred sites. They associate with sacred sites. They accompany sacred sites. And so we are going to learn from Graham, from his wife, and from others that we'll be inviting, including, of course, several of the people that you heard, because we know you want to hear them again. So we would like to convene you from this time. Please be on our mailing list. We'll be letting you know where exactly it will be held, very likely here, but we don't know that yet. But the third weekend of November for 2005 for Signs of Destiny again. Thank you so very, very much. And thank you to all the great staff and crew. Some of them are out of the room, but I really appreciate that. Thank you.